The steady hum of the airplane's engines blended with the rush of wind outside, a sound so foreign to Sergeant Jack Taylor's ears. His hands, once strong and steady, gripped the worn seat cushion as his thoughts drifted back to the hell of war, the explosions, the gunfire, the constant fight for survival. But amidst the chaos, one constant had remained: Max. Max wasn't just a dog. He was Jack's partner, his best friend, his constant companion through every mission, every combat zone. Together, they had faced dangers no man or dog should have to endure. Together, they had survived the nightmare. But now, as Jack sat on the plane headed back home, Max was not by his side. Max was gone. The separation had come without warning. One day, Max had been with him, working side by side in the harsh terrain of the desert. The next, the unit had been ambushed, dozens of soldiers and military dogs lost in the chaos. When Jack had finally regained consciousness, his first thought had been of Max. But Max was nowhere to be found. He was gone. Jack had spent the weeks following the ambush, combing through military paperwork, hoping to track down his partner, only to be told that Max had been sent to a military dog training facility, a cold, sterile place for dogs who had served their purpose, a place where they were left to fade into the background of civilian life, never to see their handlers again. Meanwhile, Max sat in the kennel, staring out through the wire mesh of his cage. His once vibrant eyes had dulled, his fur matted and unkempt. He had been trained for one thing: to protect and serve alongside his handler. But now, in the isolation of the kennel, he felt useless. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He wasn't Jack's partner. He was just a dog. The days blurred together. Every morning a new face would come to walk past his cage, but none of them were Jack. He had lost count of how many times he'd heard the sounds of boots hitting the ground, expecting to turn and see his handler's familiar face, but it never came. He missed Jack's voice, the commands he had learned to follow with instinct. He missed the way Jack would rub his ears, whispering words of encouragement before each mission. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. The training facility was quiet, but the silence only served to make the memories of the war more vivid. The faces of fallen comrades, the smell of blood and dust, they all haunted him, a constant reminder of what he had lost. Back at home, Jack's life was no better. He had tried to reintegrate into civilian life, but nothing felt right. The world had moved on, but he was stuck in the past. The memories of war lingered, and no matter how hard he tried to suppress them, they were always there, just beneath the surface. He found himself pacing the halls of his small apartment, the silence unbearable. His family had welcomed him home, but they didn't understand. How could they? They hadn't lived through what he had, hadn't experienced the bond between a soldier and his dog. They couldn't understand the way the silence felt like a weight, a crushing force that threatened to suffocate him. It wasn't until one particularly lonely evening, as Jack stared at a photo of him and Max from their last mission together, that he made up his mind. He couldn't live like this anymore. He needed to find Max. He needed to reunite with the only living being who had shared that hell with him, the only one who could understand what he had been through. Jack stood up, determination filling his chest. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to stop until he found Max. The journey to find Max would be long and filled with obstacles. Jack would have to navigate the bureaucratic red tape of the military, cross paths with old acquaintances, and face the painful reality that not every reunion ends with a happy ending. But for Jack and Max, this was only the beginning. Jack sat in the corner of the coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm cup of black coffee that had long since lost its bitterness. His fingers drummed restlessly against the porcelain mug, the rhythmic motion a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. For the past week, he had been gathering the pieces, the paperwork, the calls, the emails, to start the long and grueling process of finding Max. But the more he dug, the more elusive his partner became. He had contacted the military's K9 division, only to be told that Max had been transferred to an official military dog training facility. Jack had tried to reach the people running the facility, but they had either ignored his calls or fed him a steady stream of empty promises. It felt like everyone was trying to shut him down. Jack's frustration boiled over as he stared out the window, watching people go about their lives, oblivious to the haunting void that had taken over his. They didn't understand. How could they? He rubbed his face, taking in a long breath, and then stood, tossing a few bills on the table to pay for his drink. It was time to take the next step, go directly to the source. The drive to the facility was long. The highway stretched out before him, endless miles of asphalt beneath the morning sun. Jack's mind wandered, replaying memories of Max, the first time they had met, the bond they had forged through the years of combat. The way Max had protected him, even when it seemed like all hope was lost. But it wasn't just the good memories that haunted him. There were the dark ones, too, the moments of terror, the blood, the loss of comrades. The echoes of that violence would never truly leave him. He couldn't help but feel guilty. If Max had been with him, would the ambush have been different? Would they have been able to escape unscathed? But he knew those thoughts were useless. Max had saved his life more times than he could count, and the dog deserved to live out the rest of his life in peace. But that peace was hard to find in a military kennel. As Jack neared the facility, his heart began to pound. He hadn't expected to feel this nervous. He had been in worse situations, in far more dangerous environments, but this felt different. This was personal. The gates of the facility loomed in front of him, tall and imposing, the sign, Canine Training and Rehabilitation Center, hanging above like a reminder of all the dogs and handlers who had passed through here. He parked his car and walked toward the entrance, his boots echoing on the pavement. The building was more like a compound, with several separate training areas surrounded by high fences. He was met by a stern-looking man at the front desk, a man who wore the same fatigues as Jack, but whose eyes were colder, more distant. "Can I help you, sir?" the man asked, his voice flat. "I'm looking for a dog," Jack replied, his words thick with emotion. "A military dog. His name's Max. He was assigned to me in Afghanistan." The man's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid I can't give out that kind of information. You'll need to file a request with the military." "I've already filed the request," Jack snapped. "I've been waiting weeks. I need to see him. I need to bring him home. He's not just a dog. He's my partner. We've been through hell together." The man raised an eyebrow but didn't respond immediately. Jack could see the walls coming up around him, the familiar bureaucracy of the military standing in his way. He had encountered this before, red tape that kept soldiers from getting what they needed, what they deserved. "I understand, sir," the man said, his tone softening just slightly. "But the process takes time. We can't just hand over a dog without the proper paperwork. If you're looking to adopt, you'll need to go through the proper channels." Jack clenched his fists at his sides. He had been through this too many times, had been told to wait, to be patient. But this wasn't just any dog. This was Max, his partner, his brother. "I don't have time for channels," Jack growled. "I just want to see him. If you can't help me, I'll find someone who will." The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll make a call, but understand you won't be able to take him today. It's a process." Jack didn't care about the process. He just needed to see Max, to know that his dog was alive and well, that he hadn't been forgotten. Later that afternoon, Jack was allowed to enter the training facility's holding area. His heart raced as he walked through the long hallways, past rows of cages and pens, each one holding a different dog, each one with a different story. He could feel the eyes of the dogs on him, their gaze searching, curious. Some wagged their tails in recognition of the soldier's presence, while others simply stared with tired eyes. At the end of the hallway, the man who had met Jack at the front desk led him into a small room. There, standing in the corner, was a large German shepherd, lean and strong, his coat a little worn but still impressive. Jack's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, neither man spoke. It was as if time had stopped. Jack stared at the dog, and Max stared back, his gaze unreadable, his body tense as though unsure of the man standing before him. And then, without warning, Max's tail began to wag. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jack's heart swelled with emotion as he stepped forward, crouching down slowly. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with the weight of years of separation. Max's ears perked up, and with a soft bark, he trotted over to Jack, nuzzling his face. The reunion wasn't as loud or as dramatic as Jack had imagined, but it was just as powerful. It was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he realized he could finally bring his partner home. But the battle wasn't over yet. Jack stood up, turning to the man who had brought him here. "I want him," Jack said, his voice firm. "I want to take him home, whatever it takes." The man didn't respond immediately, his expression hard. The silence in the room stretched out as Jack held his ground, and then the man finally spoke. "It's not that simple, sir. There are protocols, paperwork, and, well, Max has other issues that need to be addressed." Jack's heart dropped. "What kind of issues?" The man hesitated. "We'll discuss that later, but I'll do what I can to get you the paperwork. For now, take some time with him. I'll be back shortly." Jack nodded, feeling both relieved and anxious. Max was here, but the real battle was just beginning. The following days blurred together in a haze of meetings, phone calls, and forms that Jack could barely bring himself to read. Each day he spent in the military dog training facility, the harder it became to leave without Max. He had expected obstacles. He had been prepared for the red tape, the bureaucracy, the endless rules, but he hadn't expected it to feel this suffocating. Every day, the man who had introduced him to Max, Officer Daniels, took him through another round of interviews with high-ranking officials, supervisors and veterinarians, all of whom seemed determined to remind Jack just how little control he had over the situation. "Max isn't just a dog, Sergeant," one officer said, sitting behind a desk with a stern look on his face. "He's a retired military asset. There are procedures in place for releasing dogs back into civilian life. It's not as simple as signing some papers." Jack gritted his teeth, holding back the urge to snap. "I don't care about procedures. I care about my dog." "I understand your attachment, Sergeant." "Believe me, I do," the officer said, his voice softening only slightly. "But Max needs to go through a full psychological evaluation first. It's standard procedure. We don't just hand dogs over to anyone without making sure they're fit for civilian life." Jack clenched his fists at his sides. "I've seen what Max can handle. I know him better than anyone else. He's ready. He's been through hell with me, and now he deserves peace." The officer didn't respond. Instead, he slid a stack of papers across the desk. "Please fill these out. You'll also need to provide a stable home environment report and undergo a home visit. It'll take some time, but if everything checks out, we can proceed." Jack's patience was wearing thin, but he nodded and grabbed the papers. It was the next step, the next hoop to jump through. But with each form he signed, he felt like he was losing a part of himself. Each piece of paper, another reminder that his bond with Max wasn't something the military understood. They saw Max as a tool, an asset that had fulfilled its purpose. But to Jack, Max was more than that. He was family. When Jack returned to the kennel that afternoon, Max was waiting for him. The dog's ears perked up when he saw Jack approaching, his tail wagging in recognition. Jack's heart swelled as he crouched down to greet him, the familiar weight of his partner's presence a balm for his fraying nerves. "Hey, buddy," Jack murmured, scratching behind Max's ears. I'm not giving up on you. I promise." Max licked Jack's hand, his eyes full of affection, though there was a hint of confusion as well. It was clear that the dog was unsure of what was happening, why his partner wasn't there to take him home. Jack understood that feeling all too well. He didn't belong here, and neither did Max. The bond between them was undeniable. It was in the way Max followed Jack's every movement, the way he instinctively knew when to protect him and when to offer comfort. The dog had been by his side through the darkest days of war, and now, after all this time, Jack couldn't bring himself to leave him behind. As the days stretched into weeks, Jack found himself growing increasingly frustrated. The waiting game was wearing him down, each day spent in the facility gnawing at his resolve. Max had been given a clean bill of health, but the psychological evaluation was dragging on longer than expected. Jack knew that Max had been through hell, that the scars of war ran deep in both of them, but he also knew that Max had shown nothing but loyalty and love throughout the years. Jack's frustration grew as the military continued to delay the process. During one particularly heated conversation with Officer Daniels, Jack slammed his fist on the desk. "This is absurd. Why are you making this so difficult? You know as well as I do that Max is ready. Why are you treating him like a liability?" Officer Daniels didn't flinch. "We have protocol, Sergeant. It's not personal. We just want to make sure Max transitions smoothly into civilian life." Jack leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "You think he'll transition smoothly in a kennel? You think that's the life he deserves? You're holding him back. You're holding me back. We're both stuck in this damn system, and it's tearing us apart." Daniels met his gaze, but his expression softened. "I know it's hard, but we have to ensure that he's fit for adoption. If you want him, you have to prove that you can. Give him the life he deserves. It's not just about you, Sergeant, it's about Max." Jack stood up, his hands trembling with the weight of his emotions. "I've spent my entire life in a war zone, but the hardest fight I've ever faced is this one. I'm not leaving here without him." That night, after another round of paperwork and evaluation forms, Jack sat alone in the small office the facility had given him. The empty space felt oppressive, a reminder of how far he had come to get to this point, and how far there was still to go. He stared at the photo of himself and Max, taken just before their last mission together. It was a simple shot, both of them looking exhausted, dirty, and covered in dust, but there was a bond in that photo that no one could take away. "I'm not giving up on you, Max," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. "We're going to make it through this. I'll bring you home." Just then, the door to the office creaked open, and Officer Daniels stepped in. He looked tired, his face drawn with the weight of the past few weeks. "I'm doing what I can, Sergeant," Daniels said quietly, his tone soft. "I've pushed through some of the bureaucracy, but I can't promise anything just yet. There are still a few hurdles to clear." Jack looked up, his eyes burning with the fire of determination. "I don't care about the hurdles. I'll fight for him. I'll fight for both of us." Daniels nodded, his expression hardening. "I'll see what I can do. But I need you to understand something, Sergeant. This isn't just a dog. It's a life we're talking about here. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure Max has a future. I just need you to be patient a little longer." Jack's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in weeks, he felt like someone understood. Maybe the battle wasn't over yet, but at least he wasn't fighting alone. Jack couldn't remember the last time he had felt his heart race with anticipation like this. For weeks, it had felt like the world was closing in around him. Paperwork, evaluations, waiting for the phone call that would determine the fate of the only living being who truly understood him. But now, as he stood outside the gates of the military facility, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel felt almost surreal. The call had come in that morning. After months of back and forth and seemingly endless delays, the military had finally signed off on Max's release. The endless evaluations were over. The paperwork was complete. Max was his. It still didn't seem real. He stood by his truck, staring at the door to the facility. His fingers drummed impatiently against the side of his leg, the adrenaline running through him like wildfire. And then, there it was, the sound of barking, familiar and deep, echoing through the chain-link fence. Max was on the other side, waiting for him. The officer in charge of the kennel came walking toward him, holding the leash in his hand. There was something almost ceremonial about it. The passing of a life, a duty, a partner. "Sergeant Carter," the officer said, his voice solemn but understanding. "We've completed everything. He's ready to go home." Jack nodded, his throat tight. He swallowed hard, but no words came out. He reached for the leash, taking it gently from the officer's hand, his eyes never leaving Max, and then finally they were together again. Max's tail wagged furiously, his body vibrating with excitement. He couldn't contain himself, his paws dancing in place as Jack knelt down, finally, after what seemed like a lifetime, to meet him at eye level. "Hey, buddy," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse. "We're going home." Max licked his face, showering him with affection, as if to say, "Finally." Jack chuckled, the sound foreign after weeks of tension and stress. He could feel the weight of everything lifting, replaced by a warmth that spread through his chest. It took a moment for Jack to find his voice again. "I missed you, pal." Max leaned into Jack's embrace, his head resting gently on his partner's shoulder. The years they had spent together on the battlefield had forged an unspoken connection between them, one that went beyond words. Max wasn't just a dog, he was family. The drive home was quiet, save for the sound of the wind rushing through the open windows. Jack had the radio on, but the music barely registered. He was more focused on Max, who sat in the passenger seat, his eyes gazing out the window with an almost contemplative look. Max hadn't been in a car for years, and Jack wondered what was going through his mind. The city faded behind them, replaced by fields and open land as they approached the small house Jack had built for himself in the outskirts of town. It was a modest place, tucked away on a quiet street where the bustle of urban life didn't intrude. The kind of place where someone could forget the world for a while. It had been Jack's sanctuary after returning from the war, the only place he'd felt he could breathe again. Max's ears perked up as they turned onto the gravel driveway. Jack slowed the truck, the engine idling in the stillness of the evening. "This is it, Max," Jack said softly. "Our new home." Max gave a low whine, his gaze locked on the house. For a moment, Jack wondered what the dog must have been thinking. Max had been through so much, the long deployments, the constant motion, the never-ending battle. Now they were both here, in this quiet little house, far from the chaos of war. Jack pulled the truck to a stop and turned off the engine. The silence that followed felt deafening, but it was the kind of silence he needed. The kind that wasn't filled with the sounds of gunfire or helicopters. Max jumped out of the truck, his body moving with an eagerness Jack hadn't seen in a long time. The dog trotted toward the yard, sniffing the air, his senses alert but not on edge, like he had been during their time in the field. Jack followed him, watching as Max explored his new home, an open space to run, to play, to finally be free. Jack took a deep breath, stepping out of the truck and walking toward the porch. He hadn't been able to bring himself to leave the military base without Max, but now that he was home, there was still something unspoken between them. They both had ghosts they needed to deal with, wounds that hadn't fully healed, even with all the time that had passed. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. The first few days were a blur of adjustments. Max wasn't used to the quiet of civilian life. He would pace the house, his ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound, his eyes constantly scanning the windows, as if expecting trouble. Jack understood. He, too, was still adjusting. The constant tension that had accompanied his every step in the military was now gone. replaced by the uncertain peace of civilian life. Jack spent most of his time working from home, doing odd jobs for the local community while trying to figure out his place in this new world. And every day, Max stayed close by his side. Whether Jack was working in the yard, cleaning up around the house, or simply sitting on the porch, Max was never far. It wasn't easy. Both of them were haunted by memories of war, but they had one another to lean on. Slowly, with each passing day, they began to settle into their new life. Jack began taking Max for long walks in the evenings, something he hadn't done in years. The dog's stride was more relaxed now, the tension in his muscles easing as they roamed the countryside. Together, they both reveled in the quiet, in the simplicity of it all. One evening, as they walked along a dirt path, the sun setting behind them, Jack stopped and knelt down to Max's level. The dog looked at him, his eyes calm, his body still. "You?" "No," Jack murmured, stroking Max's fur. "I think we're going to be okay. We've both been through hell, but we've got each other now." Max licked Jack's face, as if agreeing, and in that moment, Jack knew that they had both found something rare. Peace, not in the absence of struggle, but in the shared understanding of what it meant to survive and move forward. Together, they had found their way home,